All right, American democracy, we are jumping into the presidency today in this video. Our last video was all about Congress, the legislative branch. This video is all about the president who runs the executive branch. And I apologize for the noises on these slides. So just initially, qualifications. To be president, it's kind of weird, but there's only 3 legal qualifications listed in the Constitution. You have to be a natural-born citizen, which is kind of a vague phrase. What does that really mean? Typically, the understanding means you're born inside the United States, but we've had some people challenge that. Ted Cruz, a Republican senator from Texas, he ran for president in 2016 as a Republican. Donald Trump ended up beating him out in the primaries, but he was running. He was actually born in Canada, but he claimed that that was good enough because his parents were U.S. citizens, and a court never ruled on that. You have to be 35, so remember 25 in the House, 30 in the Senate, 35 years to be president, and you have to live in the U.S. for 14 years. The idea, again, this was part of the original Constitution. They didn't want somebody being born in America, moving to another country, and then moving back and running for president. So they want you to live here at least 14 years. Kind of seems like a random number, but 14 years so you're committed to the country. Again, I apologize for the sounds. So typically, presidents can only serve for 2 terms. That was added with the 22nd Amendment in 1951. But prior to 1951, there was no law that said you couldn't serve more than 2 terms. That was just a precedent set by George Washington, our very first president. After 8 years, he decided he had enough. It was time for him to go home. It was time for somebody else to take over. So he basically walks away. He probably could have been elected as many times as he wanted until he died, but he walked away from it. And that set just kind of a tradition. Every president after Washington just honored that tradition because who are they to serve more than George Washington? All the way up until Franklin Roosevelt, FDR, during World War II and the Great Depression, our country was in bad shape, and he said, you know what, I have to do it. I've got plans to get us out of these problems. And so he got elected 4 times, and he died during the 4th term in office. And then they passed the 22nd Amendment. So you can only serve 2 terms for a total of 8 years. Technically, you can serve 10 years under the right circumstances, but for the most part, it's going to be 8 years. What do you get for being president? Well, you get a lot of nice stuff, right? It's a very important job, so you get a lot of nice stuff. You get the White House to live in. You don't have to pay rent for the White House, but obviously it's not yours to keep. You're just there while you're president. You get $400,000 per year, which is a good chunk of money, but remember, you're president 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. There are no days off. Even when you're on vacation, you're still doing a lot of work of being the president. And so you get all these other things too. The Air Force One, they have to travel on Air Force One, or obviously whichever military plane they're on is considered Air Force One, but it's obviously a very secure airplane. They can basically run the country from if needed. And they get free medical care and even Secret Service protection for the rest of their life. We have a line of succession. We never want to question who is in charge. The president is commander-in-chief of the military, is the only person who could launch nuclear weapons. And so we never want to have a situation where there's a question of who can make those decisions. So we created this line of succession. The 25th Amendment does part of this. But basically, all right, if something happens to the president, who's next? If something happens to both of them, who's third in line? If something happens to all 3 of them, who's fourth in line, and so on. And so, currently President Biden is the president. Vice President Kamala Harris, she's second in line. After her, it's the Speaker of the House, who is currently Nancy Pelosi. After Nancy Pelosi, you have the Senate President pro tempore, which is currently Patrick Leahy, and Secretary of State Antony Blinken is after him, and then it goes down through the rest of the cabinet for a list of about 25 people. And so the idea is if something tragic would happen, some big event, typically a big event where all these people are going to be there, if something happens, and a lot of them die at one time, we just go down the list, who's next. Now, hopefully that never has to happen. We never had to use this. But typically, if there's going to be a big event where all these people are going to show up, they take one of them and they hide them out somewhere. They're called the designated survivor. They're basically hidden out somewhere in case something bad happens. That person then would become the president. But hopefully, we never have to worry about that. The 25th Amendment sets up that line of succession, but it also deals with presidential disability. If the president is injured or has a medical procedure and they just can't function as the president for a short amount of time or a long period of time, the powers can be removed from the president and given to the vice president, and that's all outlined under the 25th Amendment. The vice president, again, they're an aide to the president. Historically, they haven't done a whole lot, but over the last 20, 30, 40 years, VPs have gained more and more power and responsibility. It's all up to the president how much power and responsibility they want to share with their vice president. All right, so we're really going to focus on 7 roles. Every time the president does does something, it falls into one of 7 categories. They're kind of called roles of the president. You can almost pretend like the president has 7 different hats laying around, and whenever he does something, he puts on a different hat. Now, not really, but just one way of thinking about it. And these are really the roles you want to focus on moving forward. So the first one is Chief of State. This is when the president is acting as a symbol for the United States. They're representing our country around the world, or they're representing our country to our American citizens. So it could be at special events and ceremonies. It could be awarding medals, giving a very general speech to the entire country. Think if there's a big tragic event and the president addresses the nation, that's Chief of State. They are the chief, the top person of the government. So just some pictures showing, here's George Bush at the 9/11 site, speaking to the first responders. Here's President Obama addressing the nation. Even at ceremonial events like at Easter at the White House or even Thanksgiving, they technically have a ceremony where they pardon a turkey, which is kind of a weird tradition, and they let that turkey live and they don't eat it, and awarding medals. These are all examples of Chief of State. Again, I apologize for the sounds. Chief Executive. Think of an executive of a company, the CEO of a company, the chief executive officer, they run that company. Well, same thing with the government. The chief executive, that's basically think of what the president does on a day-to-day basis. What do they do to run the government on a daily basis? And so he has 15 departments that work for him. The State Department, Defense Department, Homeland Security, Education, Agriculture, Transportation, and they all have thousands of employees within those departments that all carry out federal law and all report back to the president. And the top person in all of those departments, the secretary of all those departments, make up the president's cabinet, which is his group of advisors. So that's on this next screen here. You see the president meeting with his cabinet. You have the top secretary in each of those departments meeting with the president, giving him advice. Being chief executive is also filling vacancies. So in this picture here, you see President Obama when he nominated Sonia Sotomayor to the Supreme Court. So he's filling a vacancy on the Supreme Court. That's something you have to do on a day-to-day basis. Filling vacancies is chief executive. All right, third role is chief diplomat. And this one's a little bit easier to spot. This one is basically dealing with foreign countries. Obviously, the president is the top person who represents our government, and so any interaction we have with leaders of foreign countries, that's under the role of chief diplomat. We might sign peace agreements, trade agreements with foreign countries. We have embassies. The U.S. has embassies in almost every country around the world. So if you're a U.S. citizen who's traveling to France, or maybe you move to France, there's an embassy in France where you can go to receive help as an American citizen. And in that embassy, we have an ambassador. So the president gets to pick an ambassador to all these countries to basically kind of be the go-between that country and the president. And so just some pictures of our president meeting with different world leaders, signing an agreement, showing up at special events. These are all examples of chief diplomat. All right, probably the most recognizable role, and again, I apologize, Commander-in-Chief. Commander-in-Chief is all about the military. Any decisions that the president makes regarding the military are all under the role of Commander-in-Chief. He's in charge, or she would be in charge of the armed forces. They decide when to send troops, what strikes to make. They make the call. Now, they have advice. Not all presidents have served in the military. In fact, more recently, presidents have not served in the military. And so there's a Secretary of Defense who gives the president a lot of advice on what to do, and also the Joint Chiefs of Staff, which is the top commander in the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines. Space Command is a new one, I think. So they all give the president advice on making military decisions. This right here is called the nuclear football. And so this guy, his job is to follow the president around in case he has to launch nuclear weapons. The codes and everything he needs are in this briefcase. So wherever the president is, this guy is not far away with this briefcase in case something happens. So no, wherever that's at, he's nearby. It's just some other pictures. Here are pictures of the Situation Room is down below the Oval Office in the White House, and that's where they go to typically make top-level military decisions. Here you have President Obama. When the SEAL Team 6 went in to get Osama bin Laden, they were watching it play out on the TV screens. Here you have President Trump in the Situation Room. But even talking about what tactics to use. The Commander-in-Chief gets to decide what tactics the military is going to use. So this is a tactic called waterboarding, typically used against suspected terrorists to gain information. President Obama decided we're not going to use that. We'll use other methods. And I believe Trump brought that back when he became Commander-in-Chief. So that's the call they get to make as Commander-in-Chief of the military. Chief Legislator, this is all about laws that are passed. So the president might sign a bill into law. He might try to get a law passed. Think of Obamacare dealing with our healthcare system. It's called Obamacare. It's not the real name for it. It's really called the Affordable Care Act, but it's labeled Obamacare because Obama was pushing it. And so that's his role as chief legislator, trying to get the laws that they want passed. You think currently right now with COVID going on, President Biden is trying to get a law passed through Congress, the $1.9 trillion COVID relief bill. That's his role as chief legislator, is trying to get that passed through Congress. Once a year, the president will give a speech to Congress. It's called the State of the Union Address, basically outlining the laws he wants Congress to focus on that year. What big issues does he want to tackle? So here's just some pictures of the president signing a bill. So you have President Trump signing a bill. You look how long that bill is, and then the different pens. They typically use a bunch of pens because then they hand them out as kind of like souvenirs to people who are there. You see Obama doing the same thing with his box of pens. And here's the picture of the State of the Union Address. You have the president standing up in front of Congress, basically saying, here's what we should focus on for the next year. Political party leader. The president is the head of their political party. So you think Joe Biden is the head of the Democratic Party. Even Donald Trump, even being a past president who could come back and run again, he right now still kind of holds that label as the political party leader for the Republican Party. And so it's their job to help members of their party get elected and to raise money for their party. So, 2 years from now, the next congressional elections, you'll probably see President Biden flying around the country giving speeches in support of Democratic candidates, and you're going to see President Trump flying around the country giving speeches in favor of Republican candidates. And then also raising a lot of money for their party to use in those elections. And so here's some examples. There was a big victory fund party for President Barack Obama at the home of George Clooney. Probably cost a lot of money to go to that event. Here's a fundraising dinner for President Trump. And you see down here, $35,000 per person. Well, again, this dinner was probably not for the average person on the street. It's for people who've got a lot of money and who want to donate it to the party. And the final role, economic planner. Basically, anything doing with the economy falls into this category. So when the president looks at taxes and unemployment, inflation, all those things, jobs numbers, that's going to fall under the role of economic planner because obviously people care about the economy. And finally, what are the steps to become president? You want to become president. All right, so every 4 years we have an election. First, you have to announce that you're going to run. Typically, that happens a year to probably a year and a half, 2 years even out, and it's becoming further and further. Then in the spring, the primaries. The different parties compete amongst themselves. So in the next election, in 2024, you might have 10 different Republicans who all want to challenge Joe Biden if he decides to run. Well, they have to compete with each other. So that's when you have the primaries or in the spring as they compete and there's elections around the country, narrowing that group of Republicans down to one person. The front runner right now would be President Trump if he decides to run. During the summer, we have the big convention where the political party kind of announces their candidate, announces their platform, what they're going to focus on. In the fall, that's when the campaign is. That's when you see all the commercials on TV. You see all the signs in yards. And then in November, the people vote, the popular vote. That's when we go to the polls and we vote. But remember, our election is different for president. Our vote is not the official vote for president. Our vote influences the Electoral College, which votes in December. And then in January, that's when those votes are counted and the inauguration takes place. So January 6th, when the event happened at the U.S. Capitol, that's when those votes were being counted, and that was the movement to try to stop those votes from being counted during this last election. But, all right, that's it. I hope you learned a lot about the presidency. Have a great day.